Prior to the late 6th century, the Emerald Empire of Rokugan had known many emperors. Some good, some incompetent, some weak. But thus far, there had never been a bad emperor. The Emerald Empire had never known what it was like to have a tyrant rule over them. Hantei XVI, remembered in infamy as the Steel Chrysanthemum, was the one that broke that winning streak. But first, a little background. Following the downfall of the monk Gorino and the end of the heresy of 5 rings, the empire experienced a near half-century of peace. Nothing of note really happened, with a few exceptions. At least it seems that way, as there's almost no information given as to what happened during this time. Again, barring those few exceptions. Following the end of the heresy of 5 rings, nothing else is mentioned with regards to the remaining reign of Hantei XIII. Hantei XIV was such a non-entity that there are no events attributed to his reign. For that matter, we don't even have any dates as to when his reign began and when it ended. Things only start becoming clearer with the reign of Hantei XV, and even then we don't know when his reign started. There are only 2 events of note in this odd, indeterminate period. The first occurred in the year 540, when it was decided to hold winter court at Kyuden Togashi in the land of the Dragon Clan. What made it so noteworthy was that a lot of people died, unfortunately, trying to negotiate the mountain passes up to the castle. In fairness, if you're a courtier, winter court is essentially the highlight of the year, but still, that's one hell of a price to pay for trying to attend a party. The other was the Battle of Fortune's Plain in 554. Basically, the Scorpion and Crab clans were fighting for possession of some farmland, as well as the Shrine of Osanuo, the Fortune of Fire and Thunder, when both noticed a lion army emerging over the horizon. If they continued fighting each other, both knew that the lion would just swoop in and mop them up. The Scorpion commander proposed an alliance, but his Crab counterpart rejected it, and so it was decided to settle matters with a wager. Both clans would roll dice. The winner would claim the farmland and the shrine and fight the lion army. The loser would give up their claim and leave the field. The Crab commander agreed, but only on the condition that his clan provide the dice. The first round ended in a tie with both clan commanders rolling 12. A second round was called for, and once again the Crab commander rolled a 12. When the Scorpion commander made his second roll, one die came up 6, but the second split in half. The Crab claimed victory until the Scorpion pointed out that the faces of the broken die had come up 6 and 1, technically making the total score 13. Apparently, rather than call bullshit, the Crab agreed to the terms and left the field. The Scorpion proceeded to defeat the Lion army and so claimed both the farmland and the Shrine of Osanuo. Given the reverence with which the Crab clan hold Osanuo, this was a particularly stinging loss. At any rate, let's move on to the reign of Hantei XV, where things start to consistently happen again. As emperors go, the 15th Hantei was not especially noteworthy. He assumed the throne in his mid-20s and married the beautiful and talented courtier Doji Kaoichi Hime, who proved far more shrewd than her husband and was his greatest political ally. She proved both a canny advisor and a source of personal strength, encouraging the emperor to be more assertive and not just let his advisors run the empire for him. The union proved a loving one and produced 6 children: Toruo, then Okuchio, then Tanaka, Tsuruichi, one unnamed daughter, Michiko, and Yurikan. No date is given for Toruo, the eldest son, but Okuchio was born in 569, apparently under ominous portents the like of which none had seen since Iuchiban. Tanaka was born 1 year after his brother. Presumably the unnamed sister was born a year after that, even though no birth date is mentioned, but the next 2, Tsuruichi and Michiko, were born the following year of 572, though it's never mentioned if they were born in separate ends of the year or if they were twins. Yurikan, the very youngest, was born 7 years later in 579. Of course, as the eldest son, Toruo was the heir presumptive. But then, at the age of 7, Toruo fell into one of the ornamental fountains in the palace gardens and drowned. According to witnesses, the prince's younger brother, Okuchio, was the first on the scene and was apparently attempting to revive his brother. In reality, though, it was Uchio himself who had arranged for Toruo's death, apparently on the rationalization that Toruo bid fair to resemble their weak and mostly ineffectual father. And so, as the treacherous younger brother rationalized to himself, Rokugan needed a strong emperor in the future. Naturally, he thought himself far more suited to the task, and even if one cannot condone fratricide, one does have to admit that in some ways, Uchio was right in his personal assessment. Described as a child prodigy, Uchio made his debut at court in 575 at the age of 6, and very swiftly helped his mother expose 3 separate plots by clan daimyo in order to attain power for themselves at the expense of the throne. Though of course, no details are given as to what these plots were. Which does beg the question, at what point did he conceive of, let alone arrange for his elder brother's murder? Regardless, after stepping into the role of imperial heir, Uchio quickly became a valuable and trusted asset to his father's reign. Often it is said that the young prince came up with ideas and policies that his father implemented but could never have dreamed up on his own. No doubt many in the court, including the prince's own parents, had reason to be confident that the future of the empire would be in capable hands once this young man came into his own. As it was, though, the reign of Hantei XV, like those of his predecessors, was mostly uneventful. There are really only 3 events of note, and since we don't have any date as to when Hantei XV took up the reins of power, only one of those 3 events is explicitly stated as having occurred during his time on the throne. The first was in 580, when the Lion tried, and failed rather miserably, to annex the lands of the Centipede clan, which must have been especially humiliating given that this is a minor clan beating a major clan all by itself. The second occurred in 582 when the Crane clan went to war with the Lion clan and was on the verge of losing very badly. Then salvation had come in the form of a disgraced former clan champion named Doji Hotei, a master swordsman trained by a Kenku and entrusted with wielding Naishi, one of the 5 master swords created by Doji Yasurugi himself at the dawn of the empire. Hotei had been a master swordsman and an inspired leader, but then the death of his wife had driven him to madness. He'd abdicated the position to his younger brother and had spent the next few years wandering the empire with a few servants, engaging in a series of Don Quixote-esque escapades, including challenging trees to duels, making him something of an embarrassment to the clan. But on that fateful day, it was Hotei the great leader, not Hotei the raving madman, who returned to the Crane clan in its hour of need. He turned the tide and won the day, albeit at the cost of his life. A shrine to him was erected on the Kakita Plains, where it stands to this day. The third event of Hantei XV's reign has no date, and it just says that Bayushi Anjo, then Scorpion Clan champion, demolished a rebellious monastery. The reason for the rebellion is not given, and left behind a sign on the rubble that simply said, "No quality of soul matters more than power." An appropriately Scorpion proverb. So much for Hantei XV. As for Prince Uchio, after undergoing his Genpuku coming-of-age ceremony, he decided to make a tour of the empire, both to gain an assessment of what he would be ruling over in a few years' time, and to gain for himself a close circle of trusted allies. For the prince had big plans for his reign, and in order to achieve those ends, needed subordinates that were entirely loyal to him. As it turned out, he'd already gained one such person by the time he decided to go on this tour. Miya Karuo, son and heir of the Miya family daimyo. Both a shrewd politician and, even at this early age, a thoroughly corrupt hedonist, Karuo had seen opportunities in aligning himself with the crown prince, and after gaining permission from his elderly father, accompanied Uchio on his tour of the empire, mostly acting as the prince's herald. His job was mostly to go on ahead of the heir's party, announce his coming arrival to whatever town or city was on the itinerary, and arrange such welcome and entertainments appropriate to a man of Uchio's status. For Karuo, this also involved a lot of sampling of the local delicacies. Despite this unpromising start, as Uchio went around the empire, he began to accrue to himself followers of at least seemingly a higher caliber than Miya Karuo. Akodo Tsurikan, the son of a prominent but unnamed lion general. Suzume Kirako, the kind and good-natured daughter of the Sparrow Clan champion. Daidoji Tojo, a shrewd crane duelist and soon to inherit a position on the Daidoji Trading Council. Shosuro Tsiya, the beautiful courtier and daughter of the head of the Shosuro acting school. But perhaps the most important addition to Prince Okuchio's inner circle was Hida Tsuneo, son and heir to the Crab Clan champion, Hida Tadaka, not to be confused with an earlier Hida Tadaka that lived during the Gozoku era. A man who would one day be known as the Stone Crab for his rigid discipline and stoic courage. The story goes that the two young men became friends shortly after their first meeting, and Tsuneo accompanied Okuchio on his tour of the empire, at least for a while. One day, while traveling through lion territory, the party was ambushed by bandits. In the course of the fighting, Okuchio saved Tsuneo's life. For this, Tsuneo swore that he would follow Okuchio unswervingly, obey him faithfully and without fail. It was a promise that the imperial heir would remember. At last, Prince Okuchio, accompanied by the obsequious Miya Karuo, returned to Otosan Uchi. Karuo's father, the Miya daimyo, was on his deathbed at this point, and in fact perished before he could see his son again, which may have been just as well. That long period of indulgence on the road had left Karuo 70 pounds heavier than when he'd left home. No doubt the old daimyo would have died of shame at the first sight of him. Either way, Miya Karuo was now the Miya daimyo. And then, in 589, another transition occurred. Hantei XV decided to do something that no emperor before him had ever done. He chose to retire, confident that with his clever and capable son on the throne, the empire would be in good hands. And so it was that in the spring of 589, Prince Okuchio was hailed Hantei XVI, Emperor of Rokugan. His first order of business was to send messages to all the members of his little inner circle, summoning them to serve him at the capital. For the new emperor had plans for the empire, and he wanted men and women that he could trust around him. The stage was set, it seemed, for a glorious reign. And indeed, for the first part of it anyway, the rule of Hantei XVI would be one showered with gold. Before there was Ellen Ripley. Before there was Wonder Woman. There was the original action heroine, Atalanta. Now available in ebook, paperback, and audio form. Links in the description.